nature, shades of yesteryear shrouded in the mists of time. This is where the gods of Japan began the world. This is Shikoku. Step back and journey to a culture all its own, where castles, shrines, and temples sit, undisturbed. Enchanted and of ageless tradition, Shikoku is a land apart, an island in tune with the forces of nature, and more in touch with its past. Filled with richness, drama, and art. A place where the modern world has come, but left traditional values untrammeled by the 20th century. Come with us and explore Shikoku, an island in time. When the primeval matter had congealed, but breath and form had not yet appeared, there were no names and no action. Who can know its form? The yin and yang, the male and female here began, and the two spirits were the ancestors of all creation. The sun and the moon were revealed in the washing of eyes. The gods were revealed in the washing of the body. Though the primeval beginnings may be distant and dim, by the ancient teachings do we know the time when the lands were conceived and the islands born. That passage is from the Kojiki, or Record of Ancient Things. Transcribed in 712 AD, it is the oldest book in Japanese literature. Mythic in nature, yet taken as truth until the recent past. Reaching back unbroken across 2,500 years, it traces Japan's imperial family to its legendary founder, the sun goddess, Amaterasu. With divine spears stirring primordial depths, it tells how the gods Izanagi and Izanami created the world, beginning with the two islands of Awaji and Shikoku. This program explores Shikoku, one of the four main islands that make up the Japanese archipelago. Shikoku has always been considered an out-of-the-way place. It is a remarkable island, which has preserved many elements of Japanese culture in a way not found among those places more often frequented by Westerners. A solitary pilgrim rings the temple bell as pigeons scatter. The ringing fills the temple compound. The smell of incense wafts across the plaza. At the ceremonial urn, women place lighted incense, an offering to carry up their prayers. In a ceremonial gesture, they waft the smoke over their bodies, bathing themselves in its aroma to bring good fortune. This is Zensuchi, the temple where virtue is passed. It is a place of worship, meditation, and celebration, where children can play amid the religious icons, for flower festivals and moments of private reflection. It is also the birthplace of Kukai, the cultural father of Japan. Born in the year 775, Kukai impacted almost every part of Japanese life, both then and now. The main temple hall sits above the place of his birth. Underground, below it, an alcove waits in dark coolness for pilgrims to visit. As it sits today, it is 300 years old. The main temple is built of heavy wood timbers with a traditional tile roof. Inside, priests hold ceremonies which have remained largely unchanged from those Kukai introduced over 1,000 years ago. Buddhism, when first introduced to Japan in the 7th century, was largely the domain of the elite, who had access to written texts and the time to pursue them. Salvation was personal. Kukai's Shingon sect taught that to be true, Buddhism had to impact the lives of all men. Improving the world we live in was not only possible, but an obligation. Though its rituals are laden with incantations and secret signs known only to trained priests, Kukai's sect of Buddhism was the first to open its doors to people from all classes of society. Kukai was posthumously awarded the honorary title Kobo Daishi, Kobo meaning to spread widely the Buddhist teachings, and Daishi meaning a great teacher. In some ways, his life seems contradictory. He renounced the world, yet led a life deeply involved in the creativity and concerns of the world. He was influential in the government and in the day-to-day life of the common folks. But he was also one who loved solitude in nature, walking through distant forests in contemplation. Ku meaning sky, and Kai meaning sea. Even his name is a contradiction. Joined, yet incompatible. A paradox fitting to a Buddhist priest. Self-enlightenment comes from helping others on the road to nirvana. This is Man no Ike, the Lake of Beautiful Harvest, first built in the year 701 to trap spring runoff for use in the summer. Walking the route and traveling alone, he demonstrated his devotion and dedication to his beliefs. As he began to feel the weight of his years and the responsibility of his post, Kukai set out on a final journey to his home island of Shikoku, a place with deep spiritual meaning for the saint. Wearing traditional garb, a white robe, hat, and carrying a walking stick called a kongo zue, pilgrims follow his path. The tradition requires each pilgrim to beg for his needs on the route. The rich and poor were pilgrims side by side on this journey. The effect has been a democratizing influence in a culture where strict class distinctions have always existed. Also, the act of begging forced those who gave to do a good act and so improved their karma. Buddhist monks began actively retracing Kukai's steps in the 15th century and were soon followed by devout followers of Shingon. Not very many years ago, it was a journey made on foot, taking considerable time, over 2 months and covering 900 miles. The pilgrimage served to introduce the Japanese to themselves. It is a pilgrimage that doesn't belong to a single religion, but constitutes an act of faith and demonstration of personal devotion unique in the world. Uniquely Japanese, but available to anyone from any religion. The deities of Japan created the world, and from them all things descended. Crackling torches cast dancing shadows within the small circles of their light. Dressed in costumes unchanged for almost a millennia, Shinto shrine priests accompany the spirit of their kami on his journey to another land. All enhance the timeless feeling. Held annually in October, this grand autumn festival is the result of an 800-year-old blend of primitive harvest rites and the established mythology of Shinto. In ages past, when the kami were more real and superstition was truth, the night air would have been fraught with uncertainty as anxious people gathered to see the safe departure of their guardian deity. This nighttime procession marks the culmination of 3 days in which the resident kami is prepared for his annual journey to the grand shrine at Izumo. Traditionally, the month of October was known as Kanazuki, the month with no gods. It was believed that during this month, all of the kami in Japan gathered at Izumo, home of Susanoo, brother of the sun goddess. In secret rituals over the past days, the welfare of the populace was placed in the hands of the priests. It was in their hands to properly supplicate the kami. In town, the citizens wait for the kami to pass. Symbolizing purity of soul, a young boy rides a sacred white horse. A young girl rides in a palanquin. In major rituals, the kami is moved from its resident sanctuary in the shrine and taken out in the omikoshi, a portable palanquin which allows the kami to take a more immediate part in the festivities. It also takes the kami out amongst the populace to more easily spread his benevolence. Clouds of pink shroud the hillsides as sakura cherry blossoms explode under the strengthening light of the spring sun. Musicians playing ancient instruments lead the procession as it winds its way up the more than 1,000 steps leading up to Kotohira's sanctuary. Other attendants are entrusted with the offerings to be made. Made from virgin wood grown in sacred groves, these giant trunks hold the food and drink to be offered, as well as the utensils to serve with. In an age-old tradition still very much alive for Japanese today, this is an opportunity to step out of the rigors of daily life and take part in the celebration of life. For the followers of Shinto, this is proof that the kami of the land is content. The Miko shrine maidens carry sprigs of flowering cherry, symbols of nature's rebirth. Each of these young women are true shrine maidens. By their own choice, they have undertaken the rigorous training and study required to be deemed pure in body and soul. Though held for just a few years, this honored post as attendant Miko is not taken lightly. Even in this modern day and age, having the experience as a shrine maiden in service to the kami is the ultimate gold star next to one's name. For past benevolence and continued future harmony with nature, thanks is given to Okuninushi, enshrined here at Kotohira. Held in April, this ceremonial offering to the kami is one of the most spectacular in Japan. It has changed little since the time of Okuninushi's taking residency here almost 1,000 years ago. When the great Buddhist monk Kukai came here, he took the seafaring aspect of the shrine and linked it with the Hindu river god Gumbara, which in its Japanized form becomes Kompira, the common name for the shrine. Without ousting the Shinto god, the site became popularized for a Buddhistic figure, which was actually Hindu in origin. The common folk have continued to come here to offer thanks or ask for help. The first and most important step in Shinto ceremony is purification. Each and every participant has undergone the days-long rituals to purify body, mind, and soul. The food and drink, the utensils on which they are served, as well as the implements of ritual, have all undergone similar purification. Once the offerings have been placed, the kami are entertained by Miko maidens, in a Miyakagura dance as old as Japan itself. True to Shinto's roots in shamanism, the Miko mirror the ancient descriptions of high priestess rulers. The bell clusters carried by the Miko dancers represent the bundled sprigs of sacred leaves used in rituals since the dawn of time by cultures all over the world. The shrine Miyakagura danced here is special, performed solely for the benefit of the kami. There is another form of Kagura found here on Shikoku. Sharing the same name, Kagura translates as kami pleasure. Come with us out to the countryside and see. Little more than glowing embers remain to keep out the autumn chill as the hardy file back inside for another act in the epic narrative dance of the Sato Kagura, or rural shrine dance. Dance was the medium by which the legends were passed down the generations. Here, deep in the mountains of Shikoku, the age-old tales of the Kojiki myths are still being played out. In Sato Kagura, there are several cycles outlining the main themes of the Kojiki. The young dancer is calling the attention of the gods to let them know of the coming offertory performance. When the goddess Amaterasu confined herself to a cave and plunged all into darkness, the other gods, unable to lure her out, resort to a comic dance so that the 900 myriad gods laughed. Like many ancient forms of sacred dance, it is expected that those watching are as familiar with the narrative as are those performing. With nothing but a simple cape, the supernatural nature of the character is portrayed. Much of the general movement is free form, left to the performer to decide. Costumes, props, and masks also became adapted to fit one character. Though similar to later demon masks, here the mask symbolizes the supernatural, its fierce expression indicating the masculinity and strength of the character. The fan is used to depict forces and objects in nature. A waving motion is often used to show the ocean, symbolic of a great journey to unknown lands. Moved vertically, it could indicate trees, the rain, or other obstacles. The white paper wands are symbols of sacredness and magic. It protects the character from evil, and combined with the sword, becomes a weapon of magic. As certain troops became sponsored by the imperial court, styles became highly structured to eventually develop into unique dance forms of themselves. With the wood clappers increasing in tempo, the curtain is drawn open with a flourish to reveal the narrator. This is the puppet theater of Shikoku. Its roots can be traced back to the island of Awaji, compared to the more famous Bunraku puppet theater still popular in Osaka. The puppets of Shikoku are much larger, called Ningyo Joruri. These giant puppets require 3 puppeteers to control them. This one act of a much longer play is all that remains of a once massive repertoire of plays. Called Keisei Awa no Noruto, it tells of the meeting between a daughter and long-lost mother. Traveling on a pilgrimage in search of her parents who left her as a babe, the girl does not realize the identity of the woman. The woman, though, recognizes her daughter as the story unfolds. Unable to reveal their relation to each other for fear of jeopardizing a greater story, the mother sends the girl on her way. Too late, she runs out to stop the girl for one last look. Kabuki began in 1603 with women dance troupes performing on a Kyoto riverbed. Within a decade, it had transformed into an all-male cast. Here on Shikoku, this tradition of rural kabuki is still a very strong part of life. It offers a chance for a break from the rigors of farming life, a chance to swap tales and spend time with family. These actors are all locals, amateurs on stage just for the fun of it. The audience is familiar with the story, so it is easy to follow. In the towns of the feudal era, such kabuki troupes provided one of the only means of entertainment for townspeople. Chafing for ways in which to show off their wealth, the merchants would adopt a particular troupe, giving the actors a regular place to perform and polish their skills. Kotohira, with its popularity as a pilgrimage site, developed a local theater in the mid-1700s. The advent of movies and other Western-style entertainment drew audiences away from kabuki. As a result, many rural theaters were forced out of business. Through it all, the little theater in Kotohira continued the annual tradition, with actors from the big families coming to entertain. Here, the townspeople may come up to their favorite actors, giving words of encouragement or greeting. It's all a very informal day. Treated like visiting royalty, the actors are carried in luxurious rickshaws on the trip to the theater. The small stage at Kotohira allows the actors an unparalleled intimacy with the audience, reminiscent of kabuki as it was. The small doorway forces all in the audience to crouch in, a symbolic bow to show that, in here at least, all are of the same class. Since the early days of kabuki, the scripts were written with sections allowing for the actor to ad-lib. The audience waits eagerly to hear how good the lines will be. Without losing their professionalism, it allows the actors to joke with the audience, poking fun at anything from local traits to national and global events. threading my way between insect voices, a path through the fields. How high it snows. The only sound, the cry of a white cat up on the ridgepole. These short poems are called haiku. This Japanese poetic art has been evolving for over 1,000 years. While most Americans are familiar with haiku poetry, often learning the simple form in grammar school, very few people in the U.S. have heard the name Masaoka Shiki. But it was Shiki who developed haiku to a point where its elegant vision, simple structure, and ability to express the natural world would establish it as a poetic form that would become popular worldwide. The great irony of this is that Shiki, for all his love of haiku, believed the form was destined to die out within a very few years. During the restoration of imperial rule in Japan, known as the Meiji period, it was Shiki's commitment to poetry that made him the central force in the establishing of haiku as a serious poetic form. He was convinced that haiku had to move out of the realm of humor and fantasy and into the realm of nature to be valuable and durable. Haiku was Shiki's way to create snapshots of the natural world and its beauty. At his most prolific, he was writing 4,000 haiku a year. He made the observation of nature a strict discipline. Tsuki gogo to Satsuki no ume no narewataru. His lifelong battle with tuberculosis haunted him and eventually confined him to his bed for the last 7 years of his life. Although bedridden and very ill, Shiki continued to write. The man I used to meet in the mirror is no more. Now I see a wasted face. It dribbles tears. In September 1902, at age 35, after defining the future of haiku, Shiki passed into history. But even at the end of his life, he continued to search nature to find truth. One flower is placed at my bedside. Trying to sketch it accurately, little by little, I feel I understand the secret of creation. In the early 1800s, American whaling ships hunted prey across the vast Pacific. On October 30th, 1839, Captain William Whitfield sailed the whaling ship John Howland out of New Bedford, Massachusetts, and began his journey to the Pacific. Like all captains of his era, Whitfield carefully avoided Japanese waters. It was well known that Japan maintained a strict policy of isolation, using the harshest measures. Beginning in 1603, the edict had been laid down by the shoguns that there was to be no contact with the outside. The purpose was to preserve the political power of the shogun, and those coming from outside or leaving and returning to Japan were subject to death. On January 5th, 1841, a small fishing boat set sail from Shikoku. On board were 5 fishermen, including a 15-year-old boy named Manjiro. The boat met with bad weather, and the ability to sail and navigate was destroyed. 8 days after they set sail to fish the local waters, they were within paddling distance of a small and inhospitable island called Torishima. Their boat was destroyed in the process of landing on the uninhabited rock. hundreds of miles from home. 6 months went by, and the sailors were still isolated and alone on the island, barely able to feed themselves, when a strange ship was sighted in the distance. Eventually, all 5 fishermen were brought aboard the huge 111-foot-long whaling ship John Howland, and were the guests of Captain Whitfield. During their trip to Hawaii, the Japanese fishermen experienced a totally new kind of hunt. The Howland's longboats were dropped into the sea and went out to take whales. The fishermen from Shikoku were stunned by the epic drama of capturing and killing a whale. Manjiro was the quickest to learn English and the most well-liked of the 5 rescued Japanese. When the fishermen were dropped off in Hawaii, it was John Manjiro who was given the opportunity to return to New Bedford as the guest and protege of Captain Whitfield. Once in New England, Manjiro became the ward of the captain, who saw to his education and that he had the opportunity to learn a craft. Manjiro quickly adapted to the New England public school. Not only did he excel, but Captain Whitfield was able to get the young Japanese boy enrolled in the local school for navigators. It was Manjiro's hope to learn navigation as a means for making his way back home. It took many years for John Manjiro to learn the skills that would make him desirable as a crewman on a merchant ship. But with the backing of the captain and determination on his part, Manjiro not only became a knowledgeable navigator, but also learned the cooper's trade. After many adventures, Manjiro succeeded in returning to Japan. Manjiro not only was eventually allowed to return to Japanese society, but when Commodore Perry's ships arrived in 1851, Manjiro was the only Japanese who spoke English. His knowledge of navigation and his seamanship earned him the rank of samurai. He eventually came to serve his government with great distinction. Today, the Japanese view Manjiro proudly, seeing his adventure as symbolic of the kind of relationship they want to have with America. Arts and crafts have always had an important place in Japanese society. In the early 1600s, the Matsudaira clan was given the mountaintop fortress of Matsuyama, from which they controlled the province of Iyo on Shikoku. The clan promoted many local crafts as a means for generating revenue for the province. Ceramics flourished, and the area developed its own style of utilitarian but elegant pottery, with delicate blue designs on white backgrounds, especially popular for the tea ceremony so important in Japan. At this commercial kiln, techniques of hand turning and glazing are still employed, although the firing process is handled by a modern gas-fired kiln. Traditional skills are still passed down from generation to generation, father to son. The painstaking care of the artist yields a finished product of exquisite quality and beauty. At the other end of Shikoku, in Tokushima, Otani pottery was established. Among the more traditional potters, the methods all involve handwork. pottery is dried in the sun prior to glazing, and considerable handwork give a slightly irregular but highly beautiful uniqueness to each piece. Cover sweet. The firing process is done on a traditional hillside kiln twice a year. The hillside kiln allows a very efficient use of scarce wood and maintains a constant temperature all through the kiln, very important to proper glazing. Another traditional craft is the indigo dyeing of cotton cloth. Prosperity under the Tokugawa shoguns revitalized agriculture, especially cotton. The popularity of this warm, soft fabric led to experiments with dyeing, the most popular of which was a process called aizoma, or indigo dyeing. Indigo was often rubbed onto insect and snake bites. Perhaps the natural ammonia found in indigo worked as an antivenom. In this rare footage from the early 1900s, we are given a glimpse of all that was involved. Indigo is a generic term applied to plants containing indican, a clear liquid which turns blue when oxidized. The deep blue indigo comes from Tadei-ai, or field-grown indigo, a bright green plant introduced from China in the 5th and 6th centuries. Seeds are planted in beds in February to early March. In May, the half-foot-high seedlings are transplanted to dry fields where the tops of the plant are harvested in June and July. A second growth of leaves is ready to be picked in August. The dried and chopped leaves are winnowed from the stems by using wind, now supplied by fans. At the end of summer, the harvested leaves are spread out on a raised bed, specially made of layers of gravel, sand, chaff, and clay. This layering retains water, then allows evaporation. Water is splashed on the pile every few days, accompanied by a good aeration by raking. Repeated for over 20 soakings, the 12th soaking or so sees the compost begin to form hard clumps, which are manually broken apart and sifted through a screen. A half-dozen cycles later, the re-solidified mass is again broken up and sifted. Ideal fertile conditions were assured by yearly flooding of the Yoshino River plain. Grown from the early 17th century, awa indigo was so highly prized that production methods were a jealously guarded secret. Selling of the leaves or seeds of awa indigo was ruthlessly enforced, and some awa farmers who broke the rules were beheaded. 4 families in Shikoku still continue the traditional process of tsukumo production. The best tsukumo, or base indigo paste, used by the dyers came from indigo grown in Awa on Shikoku Island. With the approach of cold weather in October, thick straw mats are secured over the pile to retain heat naturally generated by composting. The best tsukumo results when the temperature of the compost is kept around 55 to 60 degrees centigrade in balanced humidity. The maintenance of the optimal humidity was such a crucial step that it was monitored by a highly specialized group of professionals called mizushi, or watermen, who went to each indigo farm checking the balance of heat and humidity. The true master mizushi could analyze a Shikoku pile by the heat generated and by the smell of the composting indigo. Roughly 100 days after starting the process, the Shikoku is ready for distribution. The initial mountain of indigo leaves is now a mere 1/20th of its original volume, yet retains some 65% of its original weight. In the past, the Shikoku was dried more, pounded, then squeezed into concentrated pellets called aidama, indigo balls. Pinching off a small fragment, an expert dealer of indigo can reputedly tell the quality of the Shikoku by mixing it in their palm with the right amount of water for the fragment, then pressing down onto a sheet of paper. In its final Shikoku form, the leaves harvested from 1 hectare creates roughly 50 bags, each weighing 56 kilograms, or just over 123 pounds. The deep indigo colors help to hide soiled areas. Best of all, the more the garment was dipped in indigo, the more durable it became, without losing any of its natural softness. Years of tradition lie behind the making of paper on Shikoku. Called washi, the basic ingredients of this all-natural paper are separated fibers of bark peeled from young Mitsumata saplings. These fibers are suspended in a soup of yam paste in water. The slightly gelatinous nature of the soup prevents the tree fibers from sinking or clumping. A sieve-like tool is used to evenly spread the fibers in sheet form. The random interlay of fibers gives the washi incredible durability, allowing it to survive for centuries. The addition of other plant or vegetable fibers allows for a wide range of texture. The variety of the paper is further enhanced by the addition of color. It can have uniform shades by adding the color in the sifting vat during the making phase. Already made sheets of washi can also provide an interesting medium for dyed patterns.
南国の霧の木でしてね、徳島でなくて寒い方の北部、青森県福島ですね、会津が有名な木でございまして、私のところで大体10年はこれ掛け持ちなんですね。で、原木からこういったような形を作りましてね、人形師の命一本でこの時点から仕上げていきまして、一番最初にパッてして角を掘っていきましてね、それからこういった段階を日本の女性で羊みたいな残していきまして、ヘリをずっと掘って仕上げていきますと、これにちっちゃくなって仕上がるんですね。大きなというわけですね。軽さがありますから、左へそして1時間もこうして使いますからね、重いのは25秒ぐらいあるんですよ。でも、そういうことから、からくりは2箇所、女性らしいですね。おめでと首と動くんですね。男性はお口がこれ動くのです。お目目がこう動くように、眉毛もこういうふうにからくりをしてまして、下はこれで、首を振りまして、新串と申します。この穴からその糸を通して、ここでくぐりまして、操る人これを引っ張ってお人形を作ってますね。下をこれ引っ張ってみましょうか。こういったね、お目目がこない動くんですね。まあ、こういう動く。で、そしてですね、こういった眉毛もこう動きますしね、目口もこう動きますね。こういった目目がつぶりますようにね。まあ、からくりを。そしてね、これが本当の人間の毛ですよね。これ日本人じゃなくて中国人です。チャイナなんですが、人間の毛でしょう。こうして打っただけでも、もう女性が後ろ姿の感じが出ましてね、世の中今発達して、いまだに一本さえも製造できなくて、まあ、ここから5、6分を抜いていきまして、私のところで内容いただいております。1個してないのに、1ヶ月か1ヶ月半ですか、雨が降ったら塗りができませんので、2月以上かかる場合もございましてね、手間のかかる仕事、そしてね、これが女性のしなやかな色気のあるお手手でしょう。気で作ったと思いませんわ。舞踊で使うようなセクシーですね。もうこう持って口元へ持って笑いが出るんですね。そしてね、これが鉄の色、皆さんは5分と申しまして、こういった広島の柿なんですよ。貝の殻の白いところとおりましてね、いまだにですね、この引き薄で引いてね、白いところが三河で30回塗ってあるんですね。下塗りを塗って中塗り仕上げた。仕上げたことは仕上げですか。きれいな気分で、昨日毛が吹き持って。あんまり動かない人ね、役に立たない仕事しないとひっくり返って鉄の棒。カゴカゴやるやつなんですね。はいはいはいはい。途中でちゃんといいこととか、おかぼかするってこうやってやっていきます。昔からよう言います。鼻の後ろの長い言いますね。スケベなんですね。カゴカゴ昔からスケベがしておりましてね。おなかさんちょっとお皿もできて、って言って割りまして、お前または。怒られて悔しごしにちょっと見てかけて出るとこうなるんですね。かわいい顔をしておりまして、からくりとおもしろさ。今度は侍で刀で切り合いて切られるやつ、かわいそうなやつで、さあ切った場合はわしゃーと腕で回してこけていくという、そんなの見せましたがね、そんなようなんですよ。世の中男性もいろいろおりまして、お人のいい方ですよね。何も役に立たんで、一口に申し上げましたら、大阪の大手なおいしの若旦那という、私も一つはでけて匂いかにおざくさいだとかを見て、鼻向けてこういったよね、お人形ですよ。本当は大変これ申し訳なくて、徳島でよく言いますね。女性ちょっといたら住めるわけ、大事にしや、うどんもりますしね、ちょっと言えば膨れていきます。佐々木はなくし、こうしや、負けていくとストーリーございますようにね、紐引っ張りますと、バターッとなるんですよ。話しましたら、そんな可愛い顔をしておりまして、現在は日本で結構早くね、角が出かかってきております。子供さんがよく言っとる言葉で、平均って言うんでしょうね。やしゃになってぐずぐずなとこ出して、うわっとこう出していくんですよ。これをお目に上げて寄りますと、調べたら動画からしておりましてね、桃太郎氏を作っておりましたが、こんな大きな杯で、しで塗りましたお酒をなみなみとおしまいに飲ましていきますと、バカーッと変わるわけですが、まあ一口に簡単に申しますと、男性がお酒飲みすぎて酔っ払って知らんならこうなります。先ほどの女性が嫉妬してね、やさになっていきますが、人間の